Hey, everybody. My name is Jason Daniel Bailey. On September 11th, 2021, at 10:37 p.m., I quit drinking. I had stopped drinking several times before, sometimes days, sometimes weeks, even years. But the term stop implies just a pause. When you stop at a red light, you're going to be going again as soon as it turns green. When you stop in your driveway at night and kill the engine and go inside at the end of the day, the next morning you're going to be cranking the engine and you're going to be starting up again and you're going to be driving again and going to work or school. At no point in any of those processes did you ever quit driving. Well, I have quit drinking. This talk and this paper is briefly about why. The lead up to 9/11/2021. Due to COVID-19 and a few other issues, I had been living in virtual isolation for quite some time, several weeks, if not a couple of months. And this isolation had been dismantling me mentally for a while. As Labor Day weekend approached, my brain told me it would be a great idea to go on a 4-day drinking bender. I wasn't expecting to see anyone that weekend, and what better way to make that time pass quickly by being completely unaware of it happening. And it worked. The weekend passed in a 90 proof blur. I'm gonna skip some details. I'm gonna skip most of the week because there's just too much to tell. I'll hint at a little bit. We'll fast forward to Saturday night, September 11th. I'm in a hotel room in Dallas, Texas with my friend Martin. We were at a horror convention, a horror movie convention. It was getting close to 10:30. And I was in bed, still recovering from the aftermath of my bender, which did not end on Monday, by the way, as well as a stomach virus that I woke up with on Tuesday that put me down for about 4 days. So I told you there was too much to tell, too many details to go into all of that. We had agreed in advance that we were not going to be drinking that weekend. So it had been since Wednesday evening, really afternoon, that I had had anything to drink, but we were talking about my drinking, particularly about something I could not put my finger on, about what exactly it is that goes wrong when I drink alcohol. So let me interject quickly. I am not an alcoholic. I am not chemically dependent. I am not alcohol dependent. But I've known for some time something wasn't right when I drink. Sometimes just one drink and I was off to the races, out of control, guzzling gargantuan amounts of liquor, smoking cigarettes, and basically behaving like a lunatic. The next morning, as always, I would wake up and carry on as if nothing odd or unusual had happened. For me, odd is usual. So, yet often, all too often, something would happen to my logic. It would vanish. It would be replaced. It would just slip away and be replaced by a logic that was just crazy. Friends and family and loved ones, significant others have told me that I get this crazed look in my eye and I start saying things that make absolutely no sense. I grow paranoid. I make accusations. I discover conspiracies. I feel forces aligning against me. Often, I admit my response is rage. Never physical, but close enough and just as damaging. And this would go on, this would occur, these responses and this crazy logic and this rage could occur as much as 3 to 5 days after I stopped drinking, if I was taking a break or whatever. So, and I would just end up spiraling. I would feel unwanted. I would feel unappreciated. I would feel unloved, and just spiral is the word, a downward spiral into this black pit. And that barely touches on what happens during these moments, but I got to move on. So Martin and I were in the hotel and talking about my drinking issue. And I said to Martin jokingly, maybe there's such a thing as alcohol-induced psychosis. And Martin just says, maybe. And I thought for a second, and I picked up my phone and I opened up Google and started typing ALCOHOL space I. And that's all I had to type. Google populated the rest, alcohol-induced psychosis. I looked at it and I just said, I'll be damned. And I turned the phone to Martin for him to see it. He stepped out to have a smoke, and I opened my phone again. This was minutes later. I didn't look at anything till he stepped out. I opened my phone and I just clicked the first link. I didn't read much that night. I didn't need to read. I just needed to know that such a thing existed. I read little more than the little blurb, the little introductory summary paragraph for a link or two. And I just said to myself, well, that's it. No more drinking. At that moment, I was done. I had quit. My phone said 10:37. So, over the next day or two, I found some articles and did a little more reading and research. I was looking for alcohol-induced psychosis, and I found that this term is actually fluid. It's not a term that's settled on. It's pretty new pursuit of psychologists and neurobiologists. And the best article I found, which is the one a lot of what follows is taken, is from the National Institutes of Health, published in July of this year, 2021. That article calls the disorder alcohol-related psychosis, or I say ARP. So, alcohol-related psychosis. There are 3 forms of ARP. The most common form is that experienced by alcohol-dependent individuals while intoxicated, as well as 3 to 5 days after they've ceased consumption, though it's distinguished from withdrawal. The second most common form of ARP is that which occurs during withdrawal. It occurs primarily, but is not exclusive to, persons who are alcohol dependent. And then the third and the least common form of ARP is that experienced by the general population. ARP, according to the most recent studies, and still very sparse studies, affects approximately 4% of individuals who are alcohol dependent, and only 0.4% of persons who are not, of the general population. These studies are so rare. Those statistics, those percentages, are actually from a 2015 Dutch study that wasn't really pursuing this. They were looking at something else and came across these numbers about folks that were having something they hadn't identified yet. Those numbers were cited in the 2021 article that I am using. An ARP episode is virtually indistinguishable from schizophrenia. According to one article, the only here I go. According to one article, the only way to distinguish between a person experiencing alcohol-related psychosis and schizophrenia is observation for more than 3 days after cessation of drinking, at least a week. If their symptoms continue beyond that period of time, you're probably dealing with a schizophrenic. If the symptoms occur only during intoxication or the 3 to 5 day-ish period after drinking, then you're most likely dealing with ARP. So these are the current guidelines. Again, it's a brand new pursuit. So though there are many crossover aspects between ARP and alcoholism, they are distinct conditions. An individual can be both alcohol dependent and have ARP, or they have one and not the other. The one element that stands out to me that is common to both alcoholism and ARP is they are both lifelong and there is no cure. The only cure is abstinence. One sip for either the alcohol dependent person or the one suffering ARP, and they are in jeopardy of complete relapse for the alcohol dependent individual and a psychotic episode for the ARP sufferer. So ARP and me. I have alcohol-related psychosis disorder. The next several minutes or pages are the result of reflection over the last couple of weeks upon this new discovery about myself. My sober disposition. I have said many times for years, I am not good company when I'm drunk. When I'm sober, sorry. I'm not good company when I'm sober. I'm irritable, I'm snappy, I'm bitter. I want to be left alone. I want to be alone. I realize now that bitter, snappy, irritable loner me was still my disorder. It was me sober, meaning I was not actively drinking, but not yet in the clear. I was still somewhere in that 3 to 5 day period following a drinking binge. It was not the real me yet. That was me irritated by what I thought was reality, assuming since I was not actively drinking, may not have been for a few days or more, assuming that I was sober for that reason. I was annoyed and irritated by anything during that period. Any obligation or any person got on my nerves. Anything but numbness was irritating to me, especially during those days afterwards, when I wasn't anesthetized and smiling and happy and having a good time, and yet my brain wasn't clear yet either. And rarely, virtually never, did I give my brain time enough to actually clear up and experience actual reality. All too often, the mania and the irritation just became too much, and I remedied it by pouring a drink and heading back off to the races. This is my brain on alcohol. In the throes of an alcohol-related psychotic episode, and I'm calling them what they are. My thought patterns remind me of John Nash of Beautiful Mind fame. My sober brain says, if A plus B equals C, and B plus C equals D, then C plus D equals E. Fact. My alcohol-soaked brain, sorry, I just kicked my phone stand. On alcohol, my brain says, if A plus B equals C, and B plus C equals D, then C plus D equals Robert Kennedy had his own brother killed. And Zapruder was not just filming it, he was in on it. Now, what has driven me crazy and confused, the main point of confusion for so many years is when I sobered up, I remembered the conclusion. Robert Kennedy put a hit on JFK and Zapruder was in on it. But the process and the steps that I took and went through to get to that conclusion, gone. So, during my last ARP episode, wet my whistle here. During my last ARP episode, which was Labor Day weekend and the following days afterwards, it became clear to my bourbon-soaked brain that the solution to my isolation problem, the thing that was driving me crazy to begin with. The solution to that isolation problem was to delete several people from my Facebook who were very dear to me. I then determined even more effective than that was to just deactivate my account entirely. Now, when I sobered up, I still remembered my conclusion. Delete loved ones, deactivate accounts. But I have no memory of the process that got me to that conclusion. It was not out of malice. It was not out of any desire to remove these people from my life. Just my brain told me that's the best way to alleviate your isolation problem. I reactivated my account. It took me a week to do that, and I only did it because my cat went missing, and that's why I posted the thing about my cat missing. I have yet to send new friend requests to the loved ones that I deleted because I'm just so ashamed and embarrassed because I've deleted these same people once or twice before already, and for the same reason, because my psychotic brain told me to do it. My disorder told me to do it. So an ARP episode can continue for up to 3 days or more after the last drink. So even though I may be sober, my brain can still be misfiring for 2, 3, 4 days later or longer, as it turned out in this last episode. As many as 6 days this last time around, as late as September 14th, I found myself still experiencing just a faint whisper of the same tormenting, intrusive thoughts that I have battled for decades. It was only by Wednesday, a full week later, that I was no longer hearing that lying voice in my head. And it wasn't until about halfway through Thursday that I realized it had been silent for over 24 hours. Clarity after 1 week. About 5 or 6 days after my last drink, the world began to look different to me. My body was finally void of alcohol, and my neurons were firing, for the most part, the way they're supposed to. Colors were more vivid, sounds were brighter. Songs that I have heard my whole life struck my brain as if I was hearing them for the first time ever. I had a sudden clarity in reasoning, a vitality in my demeanor, a sharpness of mind, an awareness I cannot recall having in my adult life. My decision-making and my verbal response time were accelerated. My choice of vocabulary was enhanced. I found things popping out of my mouth. I was like, where did that come from? I know that word, but I don't think I've ever used it. And my wit, or some would say sarcasm, was off the chart. I have termed this my turbo brain. But I want to focus on the clarity of the reasoning, which was piecemeal in returning. As an example of this clarity, coming back gradually out of the fog of my ARP episode, I want to tell you about my apricots and prunes. When I decided to quit drinking, I knew that I would be ridding my house of all alcohol. Not for any temptation, just because I wouldn't be using it. So I decided I would bag up any bottles that were in the house and gift them to my friend Martin. And then I remembered I had 2 containers of alcohol-soaked fruit. I had a container of apricots soaked in amaretto, and I had a container of prunes soaked in Grand Marnier. And so on Sunday night, not even a week later, my reasoning was, okay, I'll keep those. I can eat those. I'm not drinking. All right. I'm not going to get drunk on them. I'm not going to eat the whole container at one time. and then when they're gone, I won't make any more alcohol soaked fruit. And then after reading a few more articles and giving my brain another day to get this wiring straightened out, things became a little clearer. And I realized, oh, wait, I can't have alcohol. So I came up with a brilliant idea that I would boil them until, there was just boiled alcohol. And so I boiled both of them, boiled them down. They smelled incredible until there was nothing left of the alcohol, but just a caramelized coating on them. And I thought, okay, I put them in the fridge, cool them off. I'll eat them at my leisure. And then I won't make any more liqueur soaked soaked fruit. Then one more day of clarity, one more day of, I didn't eat any of the fruit, by the way. I didn't touch it. I woke up Thursday morning and realized if there is one trace of alcohol left in that fruit, then I would only be delaying my recovery that much longer. It took a full week of not drinking for my reasoning and my logic to be clear enough to realize that even one innocent prune was not innocent and that I would be jeopardizing myself. Yeah, I said I wouldn't eat them all. Yeah, I said I wouldn't get drunk. I wouldn't get inebriated, but I would be intoxicated. One shot, one prune, and I'm intoxicated because I have introduced a toxin into my body, into my system. And so much as a molecule, and that may be an exaggeration, but I can't risk it. So much as a molecule of alcohol in one of those fruits, my brain would find it and exploit it. And it would be just that much longer before my system was clear. So I took the fruit to Martin. I've said for many years that I drank to slow my brain down. And to a degree, that's very, very true. In the 2 to 5 days after drinking, my brain, if I cut off drinking and give it a little time, my brain would start to fire up and accelerate, but there was no one at the wheel. The dreams and the thought processes that occurred to me during those periods of time are some of the most twisted and terrifying things I have ever endured. Not knowing about my disorder, and that if I just gave it a few more days, everything would have been silent. Instead, it would just become more than I could handle. And that's when I headed to the liquor store. I could not take the noise of my own mind. It was too chaotic and loud and violent and dark. I realized after all these years, I had become accustomed to that because I've never given myself and my brain enough time to become clear. So I thought that darkness and that torment was just the status quo. I didn't realize there was clarity a little past that. That's not in the paper. I just added that. Anyway, one sip of bourbon, everything was good again. It was all was well, or so it seemed. It just felt better and it seemed more controlled. I realize now it was only because it was slower. I had a similar clarity and sense of a new lease on life in 2011 when I stopped for nearly 2 years. The difference then was I had a judge who had told me I couldn't drink. And so I knew there was a time limit. I knew eventually there would come a day when I would be free to drink again. That day came in 2013 when the judge banged his gavel and released me. And still in my suit, I drove from the courthouse to the liquor store. And it was off to the races again for the next 8 years. Another difference between 2011 and today is then I did not have the awareness of my disorder. Therefore, I had no context. I had nothing to reflect on about what had gotten me to that point. There was no looking back or self-examination. There was just looking forward to the day when I could drink again. I was basically saying, you tell me I can't drink, then I won't. for now. Today, everything is different. This time the judge is me. I'm the one saying I cannot drink. Also, this time I am aware of my disorder. So I have a context both for reflection on the past and foresight for the future. Let me adjust my seatbelt here. If only I had known about ARP 2 years ago, I would have quit 2 years ago. If I had known about ARP 5 years ago, I would have quit 5 years ago. If the psychiatrist that the judge sent me to in 2011, the best clinical diagnostician in Tyler, Texas, Dr. Wade French, if he had said, what I think you're dealing with is alcohol-related psychosis, I would have quit in 2011. Instead, his conclusion after a battery of tests and a pre and post analysis interview, his conclusion was that I was not an alcoholic. Correct, but a dangerous conclusion nonetheless, because it gave me the green light to drink again. Off to the races as soon as my probationary period was over. I want to kick myself for not knowing about ARP sooner. But my go-to book for these things, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM-5, which was published in 2013, makes no mention of it. There's just a subcategory of substance-related disorders. The earliest speculative, and I say speculative, article that I could find was from 2018. And the one most informative, the one that felt like I was reading my own life, is the one that I have relied on most for this talk, the one from the National Institutes of Health, published 4 months ago. I cannot begin to calculate the damage that I've caused over the decades. I began drinking when I was 12 years old, and I was getting drunk regularly by the time I was in junior high. I have memories of events that can only be described as ARP episodes, going all the way back to 8th grade. I have no idea how many hearts I've broken, how many spirits I've shattered, how many souls I've crushed, or how many bodies I've left laying along the wayside in the last 40 years. I have no idea. Les Pella's heart. She's been telling me for 2 years, nearly 2 years, you just get too crazy when you drink. And she's not the first one who held my heart, who has told me those words. But I was cavalier about it. I may as well have said, like Steve Martin, well, I'm just a wild and crazy guy. That's pretty much been my response. And it's been off to the races. Again and again and again. I knew about the weird logic. I knew about my rage responses. But I also know it wasn't every time. There seemed to be no regular pattern that I could rely on to say I had a consistent problem. But I guess there's nothing really regular about psychosis. Excuse me. I also knew that I enjoyed the feeling of intoxication. I do. And most dangerously, perhaps, I knew that I was not an alcoholic. I knew I could stop. I had done it before. I knew I could quit at any time. I just chose not to. What I did not know about was ARP. The warnings and the pleadings of my loved ones just weren't enough. They should have been. They should have been, but they weren't. And for my part, that was selfish and shameful. I will never forgive myself for that aspect of my behavior. I just needed something more to convince me. And all it took was making a casual joke in a hotel room and a quick Google search. Granted, that search apparently would have netted me nothing prior to 2018, and thus it would have been off to the races again until the next crisis prompted me to dig, to find out exactly what it was that was taking place in my head when I drank. The fact that the most thorough study so far that I found is less than 4 months is no excuse for my behavior prior to reading it. Nothing can fix that. Ooh. All I can say is I'm grateful that study is there now, and I'm grateful I found it. Otherwise, as soon as I felt better after my bout with the stomach bug and the aftermath of my last bender, it would have been off to the races again. No more. Self-reflection is one of the most treasured activities that it's one of my most treasured activities. It should be for all human beings. To think that I've spent so much time, decades, reflecting on someone or something that isn't even me is heartbreaking. But now I have hope, and I have anticipation of a future where I can do it properly and with the correct subject, the real me, a future that starts now. The phrase I chose as my title and theme, Off to the Races, actually has two connotations, one positive and one negative. Pardon me, again. Clearly, I've used the negative connotation here for this talk. The headlong dive into a period of mania, frenetic activity, dark, dangerous, and all too often damaging. But its positive connotation, though still implying a departure into another realm or another state of being, its positive connotation means a journey. The journey this time is into a period of potential excitement, satisfaction, and success. It is with this connotation that I am now moving forward with my life. I cannot repair the damage I've done. Perhaps I can make amends to some, but I can start right here. I can take that first step into a world I have not yet known. And hopefully along the way, I can help someone with my story and my example. So now, confident, sober, alert, and aware, I'm off to the races. Thank you.